Xenoblade X has an absolutely enormous amount of different options for weapon and armor between all of the different manufacturers, the different types of armors, whether light, medium, or heavy, and in general there are so many potential endgame builds it can be overwhelming to really know what the best weapons and armor to focus on are. Plus, even if you do have this information, it can be difficult to really efficiently farm or get the perfect gear from enemies since you will likely want to be searching for specific traits to help you out. In this guide, I want to talk a bit about armor and weapon options, talk about preparation and setup for farming gear efficiently from unique enemies, showing where you can find those enemies, and discussing what traits are the best to look out for. This will be primarily focused on ground combat and is likely going to be mainly for players who are level 60 or higher, but the general principles can still be applied to everyone. And for those of you awaiting a skill guide, don't worry, I have not forgotten about you. I'll still be doing some preparation for that, but I'm going to have that out pretty soon here. If you enjoy guide content like this on Xenoblade Chronicles X and would love to see more, please do be sure to subscribe to the channel because it does help me out so much, and I'm getting very close to 100,000 subscribers and would really love to hit that milestone soon. Let's get into it. So, just to get this out of the way, for damage purposes, the best weapons 95% of the time are going to just be ether weapons. This means the attribute of the weapon is ether based. The reason for this is because ether weapons can take advantage of a skill called Core Crusher, which is pretty much the best skill in the entire game for damage. This skill can be found on the Mastermind class path at the end of Psy Corruptor. This skill, for whatever reason, is an independent multiplier to all other sources of damage and caps at a massive 150%. So when you are targeting an appendage with an ether weapon, you won't be able to break that appendage, but your actual damage is going to be enormous, much more so than any other type of weapon. This means if you are trying to get an optimal damage setup, an ether sword is absolutely going to be the way to go because it does 2.5 times the normal amount of damage as any other weapon because Monolith is great at balancing. So when you are buying a weapon from the shop or farming, if you have this skill, always try to go with ether weapons if you don't need to break appendages. And if you do, honestly to choose a skill designed for that purpose, which I'll probably be covering in an actual skill guide. The only time there is an even playing field is if an enemy has no appendages, which does happen occasionally. Similarly, for armor, light armor is pretty much always going to be better than medium and heavy armor as a general rule. Light armor can be upgraded more, and the extra defense from medium and heavy armor is mostly irrelevant since defense is a mostly useless stat for ground combat in this game, since it's just a flat reduction of damage, and larger hits will still kill you regardless, even if you have an extra 50 defense. Plus, you'll be more vulnerable to gravity damage with heavier equipment. Also worth noting, before we do anything else, is that sometimes shop gear can still be optimal in the post-game. Not everything has to be farmed, depending on the situation. There is certain shop gear that after you max out your AMs, can have traits you cannot normally obtain on those other pieces in any other way, making them potentially optimal in post-game if you're trying to maximize that stat. This is usually seen with potential or melee attack, where potential can normally only be found as a stat boost on head pieces of armor, but can be found on every candid incredible level 55 armor, meaning you can get more potential by using the other pieces from the shop with this stat. Similarly, melee attack is normally only found on the arms, meaning you can buy shop gear with melee attack to maximize that stat. Also worth mentioning that all types of eye patches have the Appendage Crusher trait on them, so these are absolutely worth keeping for certain builds since it's really hard to get this trait otherwise. Outside of these specific cases where shop gear can be potentially better, pretty much everything else you'll want to rely on an enemy drop. Before you start farming for post-game, my highly recommended setup is getting an Ares 90 Skell. Now, this is not a Skell guide, so this is just going to be a general overview, as this Skell is one of the best and easiest to use for farming purposes. This Skell unlocks in the AM terminal after clearing Chapter 12, and you shouldn't really need to worry about much until after this point anyway. The main point of prep work is going to just be the Moranium. You will need at least 100,000 storage to have the Moranium funds to buy the Ares 90. The other difficult material is going to be the Golden Eagerlith Heart. I recommend just using tickets to buy this, as the only other way to obtain it is from the Eagerlith 0 when its RP drops to 0, and right now we're nowhere close to that. Please look forward to a guide about that in about 3 or 4 days. This means online players, or offline players I mean, are going to be at a major disadvantage here sadly, but you can still get tickets from Division Rewards and a few other sources. Make sure to save them for this if you want to get an Ares 90, as it cannot be obtained offline any other way. The other materials can be obtained without too much issue, but the Vita cores may also need to be from time attack missions that allow you to refight the Vita if you're not going to buy them with tickets. Make sure to track the materials to find them on the map. If you do have online, well, it's significantly easier. You can set tracking and just buy with tickets. The easiest way to get tickets is either the mission terminal in the barracks or by recruiting 3 level 50 scouts and going and killing some high level enemies very quickly. The Phoenix method from my class experience guide a few days ago against Joker works very well for this. Release the scouts afterwards to get a decent amount of tickets each time. The reason this skill is so useful is because it can very easily one-shot pretty much anything you need to farm for gear with its strongest attack, the Agasser Cannon. Now you may need to also want to invest 3 weapon attack augments just to make it pretty much guaranteed, as you can equip these on the Agasser Cannon, and even Luciel the Eternal will easily get one-shot. And this can work for most enemies in the game, and it's just a generally useful skill even when you're just kind of cleaning up in the game and when you're not farming. Now this cannon does cost a lot of fuel, so maybe you want to additionally reduce fuel costs through other methods, or you may want to have a good Frontier Nav setup that gives you a lot of Moranium that restores fuel easier. I made a guide on exactly that yesterday, so you can look at that as well. Regardless, this is a great mech to farm any kind of armor or weapon you want with minimal effort, and once the preparations are done, you'll be able to start that farm. Now, you don't necessarily need this mech. You can work with any other mech, or you can just farm on the ground if you have the setup for that and you just kind of want to. But regardless, just try to have something that makes farming very easy, very efficient, and have a way to return to Skell so you can instantly start the farming process over. Once your preparation for farming is finished, I recommend that you skip travel to FN point 411. This is in Sylvalum, and you should see a giant sphere basically kind of above your head. There is an opening in the sphere with a little waterfall flowing out of it, and you're going to want to fly inside. This is where we're ideally going to be farming our weapons because it's one of the quickest and easiest ways to do, and it's also one of the most fuel-efficient ways to do it. So we're going to ignore the big giant dragon at the top here, and we're going to target the enemies just around the area. These level 66 enemies. These are Visigoth enemies, and you're just going to use your Vajra Flail against them if you are using the Ares 90, because it'll kill them with just one use of the art. You don't even have to upgrade. This can drop general weapons, which is really, really nice. So just any kind of general, usually useful post-game weapon, any ultra type of weapon at all, this will drop them, these Visigoth enemies. And you can get the highest tier of rarity from them as well if you have maxed out treasure sensors. And it is not too difficult to do, and once you are done, once you have finished grinding them out, you are able to return to your Skell. And what do you know, on the absolute second one I did here, I get almost perfect knife here, which has double melee attack traits, melee attack boost, melee attack up, and it is an ether knife as well. So, I mean, it really is just that easy sometimes. Now, obviously, you're not going to get drop rates this amazing every single time, but sometimes it can just work out really, really well for you. So this is for general post-game weapons. Now, obviously, the traits you're probably going to look for just depends on what kind of build you're doing. Each manufacturer also has different traits, and also can have different attributes for their weapon. For example, for general weapons like this, Meredith is the only one that can have an ether-based longsword. So if you wanted to get an ether longsword to take advantage of Core Crusher builds, you would ideally get a Meredith Spatha. And the potential traits this have that would be the best would be something like Potential Boost, since you are able to get Potential Boost, or Melee Attack Up if you wanted to do a melee attack focused build instead of Potential. Weapon attack power up would also be a generally just pretty useful trait, and you could also get critical rate up as well. So there are potential options depending on what you wanted to get. Speaking of melee longswords, there are a few unique post-game weapons, specifically for the longswords, that are not just general post-game weapons that drop from everything. There are certain unique monsters that only drop one type of weapon, and it is a specifically unique weapon, and the most useful of these is going to be by far the Bewitched Glaive Receding Rust. This is potentially the strongest ether longsword in the game. It is very, very close with the Meredith Spatha weapon. It really just depends on traits and everything related to that, but it has a higher weapon attack power total and can come with weapon attack power plus as well. So depending on the build and depending on what you want to do, which sword is optimal really just depends, because it can also have Ultra Fauna Slayer on it. It can have Ultra Fauna Criticals on it as a trait as well, which can normally not come on that Meredith longsword. So this Bewitched Grave Receding Rust, you're going to want to go to FN Site 209, go inside the cave, and there is this little crevice in the cave within the poison water area, and if you go all the way to the end of it, you will find Lugobanda, the Wanderer King. Lugobanda can be a bit annoying, so if you don't know what you're doing, I don't recommend coming here until you have some other post-game gears to make sure you can kind of kill him pretty easily. You're definitely going to want to make sure you use Ghostwalker, otherwise he will take control of you, because that's one of his effects, and that can be really, really annoying. An offensive stance is really good to increase your melee accuracy, because he has a lot of evasion. So that is something to maybe keep in mind as well. But he's not too terribly difficult to kill if you have any kind of setup made for killing him, and he drops one of the best longswords in the entire game, and he's the only enemy that drops this longsword. So if you kill him, he'll drop a couple of useful things. There are other useful, interesting longswords that you can't get anywhere else if you want to look those up. But as far as the most useful one, the Bewitched Glaive Receding Rust is going to be very, very powerful. You are going to need to have 6 stars manufacturer, though, and ideally have that maxed out for this. I will probably cover the specific traits that you're going to want to look for in more specific weapon guides. If you are just in post-game and not really too far, it is very, very easy just to get an ether type of weapon that you really want just from farming general enemies, and just kind of use that without worrying about the specific traits too much. But if you're running a melee attack build, you're ideally going to want to have melee attack or melee attack boost, and if you're running a potential build, you might want potential up and potential boost, just depending on what type of weapon that you are using. You can also run potential boost and potential up as support traits on your other weapon. You cannot do this for melee attack and ranged attack up, since those are exclusive to the type of weapon that you have, but potential can be a support effect on your other weapon, which can be nice to raise your potential stat even further, so those are just some things to keep in mind. For armor, basically the way armor drops work is that there exists specific unique monsters that drop armor from specific manufacturers of either light, medium, or heavy wear. If you fight the same unique monster over and over, you can get all the potential armor parts of that specific manufacturer and size, and sometimes normal enemies as well are the only way to find some of these, not even just unique monsters. Before talking about traits, let me give you the unique monsters and manufacturers list you should be focused on if you want light armor from that manufacturer. For Sakuraba Industries, Terenti the Blade Master is what drops the light armor from Sakuraba Industries. He can be found around the center of Cauldros, center right of Cauldros, around this region. Now, towards the north side of Cauldros, there is the Beast's Lair on the north right north of where I just was. There is basically a cave here, and if you enter this cave called the Beast's Lair, you probably already have it unlocked as a landmark if you've been to Cauldros and been doing things around Cauldros. There are enemies inside here that drop both Granada and Meredith. So, Granada from the Conjurer's Service and Meredith from the Lost Caro. Now, the Lost Caro is basically the only way to get any kind of Meredith light armor, and Granada, the Conjurer's Service, is one of the only two ways to get that, and the other is a unique monster that only appears in a very specific weather in Deep Fog and Noctilum, which is not reliable because the fog will just clear if you try to keep resetting it over and over. So that's a really unfortunate thing, but that is where that is located. Regardless, that is where you can find light armor for those. For Candid and Credible, you can find light armor from Izgnahni the Smoldering, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but, you know, it's just going to be this big kind of enemy over in this area. Not the level 48 unique monster, but the other one. However, I think attacking and killing this other unique monster triggers level 48 once, so you're going to need to run away after killing the Smoldering here, just to make sure that you can get your chest and then exit Skull and then come back. For the Orphean technologies, our good buddy Luciel the Eternal is a perfect unique monster for that. Like I said, it looks like you can just kind of target his leg here, and if you have the weapon attack powers plus, you should be able to kill him very easy with the Agasura cannon as well. There are other enemies like Fernando the Immovable, Gradavis the Headless Emperor, I definitely don't recommend that one, Dobromia the Alluring, Angelita the Blade Bouquet, and sometimes even from Foul Sacrifice and the Bestial Utopia, since they're pretty annoying enemies that you can encounter there. Regardless, there's a lot of decent ways to get Orphean light armor, and a lot of it is pretty decently good, especially the head, because you can easily get double potential there. And then 6 stars just dropped from the Coronids, the ancient Coronids on Lake Seal. That is one of the easiest ways to get them. Definitely one of the easiest ways to farm them, since there's a bunch all around the area. Very, very easy to just Agasura kill all of them. Unfortunately, Agni Gatling does not work without upgrades, so you can just Agasura them, and then they will drop the 6 stars. Now, the Nopon Commerce build and Factory 121 do not have armor drops that you can get from these methods. So it is just going to be these 6 manufacturers. Now, as far as trait, basically every type of head can have both potential up and potential boost, and these are going to be the 2 stats that you're probably going to want to have. You can't have any other stats related to that. As far as other useful traits, there's not really many. You can get Treasure Sensor as a 3rd trait or potential trait as well if you want to have that. And if you're running a melee attack build, you're probably just going to want to use an eye patch with the Appendage Crusher, like I said, since you can't really get that as a decent drop on any really high-level gear. For the Torso, the 2 stat boosts are just max HP up and max HP boost, and these are not really the most useful stats. So for your Torso weapon, you're either going to be running Shop Gear, or you're going to want to run Sakuraba with Aura Rapid Cooldown as the effect. That is going to be the most useful effect that you can possibly have as a weapon trait. Or an armor trait, I should say. 6 stars can also get Aura Rapid Cooldown as well, so it's going to be between one of those two if you want to get something that is not just general shop gear to boost your potential or to boost your melee attack. For the left arm and right arm, you can get melee attack up and melee attack boost depending. You cannot get both on the same arm, but Sakuraba and Candid have melee attack up, and Meredith has, or 6 stars, I mean, has melee attack boost. So those are going to be the things you're going to want to be looking for from those manufacturers, and this is for both the right and the left arm. Additionally, Orpheon can come with the ranged attack up trait, And Meredith can come with the ranged attack boost trait, and these are the ways to get those on your arms if you want to run ranged attack builds. So that is something to keep in mind as well. As far as anything generally useful outside of that, you can get overdrive count up on Orpheon as well, so that might be something decent to have on your Orpheon weapon if you're, or armor if you are able to do that, so that is something to consider. Secondary cooldown reducer can come on Sakuraba and Meredith, so that's a way to get secondary cooldown reducer if you want to have faster art recharge. And just in general, those are probably going to be the most useful traits to consider on your arms. I almost forgot to mention, but Granada can also get ranged attack boost. So that's another way to get ranged attack boost by using a Granada arm. Arms can also get max TP up. This is one of the only ways to get max TP up outside of an augment, so this is very, very useful to keep in mind. The other way is just to get it on your leg gear, since that is the only stat you can get on your leg gear. But regardless, max TP up. This is specifically on the left arm, I should say. So if you want max TP up, try to get it on your left arm if you're trying to combo it with other traits. That is something that you can keep in mind as well. It is possible to get both max TP up and a melee attack boost or ranged attack boost or melee attack up or ranged attack up. So if you want to have that, that is going to be the ideal thing to get. This is one of the best ways to get that max TP up trait, so you don't have to worry about having it as an augment, and you can run augments for other things. And of course, for leg gear, you're probably always going to be wanting to running shop gear here, since the only useful trait you can really get on it is max TP up. So you're probably going to want to run shop gear for the potential up or the melee attack boost or something like that. There aren't too many other useful traits here on the legs that you can possibly get, unfortunately. Regardless, I do think that is probably going to cover it as far as how you're going to want to try to set yourself up and what gear you're going to be looking into farming. If you want a complete table of all of the potential traits you can get on your armor and weapons, I will be linking a Google spreadsheet in the description below that you can look at, so you can just kind of figure out maybe how to optimize your own setup and what you want to build. So if you do need that, then that is going to be in the description. Regardless, I think that is probably going to cover it for me. I hope you learned something from watching this, and I hope that it will help you build your characters in Xenoblade X, especially for the post-game, depending on the build that you want to do. If you did enjoy the video, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And please be sure to share with your friends that are new to the game so they can also be broken in post-game and also have a lot of fun playing the game as well. Thank you all so much for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and hopefully I will see you back here soon. Skull Guide soon, I promise.